From WAMU 88.5 at American University in Washington, welcome to the Politics Hour starring Tom Sherwood. Well, today starring Muriel Bowser. I'm Kojo Namdi. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's an NBC4 reporter and a columnist for the current newspapers. He joins us in studio. Tom, as always, welcome.
Well, thank you very much. It's an exciting show coming up.
Also joining us in studio is our guest analyst. He is Patrick Madden. He's a reporter for WAMU 88.5. Patrick, good to see you again.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
And our guest for today is the woman of the hour, so to speak. The mayor-elect of the District of Columbia joins us in studio. Muriel Bowser, congratulations.
Thank
and
you,
welcome.
Kojo. Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
If you have questions or comments for Mayor-elect Bowser, give us a call at 800-433-8850. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, and watch the live video stream of this conversation, or you can send email to kojo@wamu.org. Shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. Tom Sherwood, why did Muriel Bowser win the mayoral race for the district?
Very simple. She got more votes than anybody else. No, she won because she ran what she said she was going to do. She ran a disciplined campaign. It was different during the campaign, and me and some columnists complained about how she was skipping all the forums this fall season.
In the 3 forums that I attended with you.
Let the record show that if I said that if she wins after missing those forums, it will show that she probably made the right decision.
Well, she's here. She can say it for herself. But in midsummer, even she was saying, her campaign was saying that they had targeted the voters. They knew who would vote for her. They went out and got them, corralled them, and got them to the polls.
Well, you know why I think we won, Kojo? Because we went around the city for 19 months. We won a big Democratic primary in April, and I knew then that residents wanted a fresh in the mayor's office. They wanted the opportunity to look at all the agencies, look at the challenges of our future, and they wanted to elect a mayor who shared their values. And that's what we talked about. We ran a positive campaign. We ran a campaign in all 8 wards of the District of Columbia, and I just couldn't be more grateful for the people who spoke up, stood up, and went out to vote on November the 4th.
Allow me to explain something.
Yes.
On this show, we have analysts. They're the ones who are supposed to analyze how the election went.
You got it.
However, having won the election, you probably know how it was done better than anyone else.
But you did have a well-organized, campaign.
Well, I told everybody from the start that nobody would work harder or smarter. I surrounded myself with really great people, and I set out a plan, and we stuck to the plan. We knew we had a winning plan, and we executed it every day. One of the favorite things I would say to my team is, let's try to win every day.
Patrick Madden, I give you a much more difficult question. Why did David Catania, the independent candidate, former Republican, lose this race?
Well, I think there were a lot of challenges that Catania faced running as an independent in Washington, D.C. 3 out of 4 voters are registered Democrats. They're fundraising. The Bowser campaign held a significant advantage in that. So there was a lot of challenges that Catania faced if he was going to be successful in a general election. But I think the Catania campaign had trouble connecting with voters, trying to explain why vote for me. I mean, that was the challenge that he had to make, and it doesn't look like he made it.
Well, he didn't get as many white voters as he thought he was going to get. He got a substantial number of African-American voters. In Ms. Bowser's campaign, she won with a pretty broad, strong support on April 1st with a lot of white voters. This time, you won parts of the city you didn't win in April. So there is a racial split in the city. Maybe we should just ask you to address that. It wasn't as bad as some of the more recent elections, but you've seen the racial split city. What do you think that means in terms of your trying to govern for all 8 wards?
Oh, we had tremendous energy around our campaign in all 8 wards.
Right.
We won 5 out of the 8 wards.
And you didn't lose badly in the ones you didn't win.
You got it. And we're very close in Ward 6, I'm told. And 2 and 3, we had almost 40% of the vote.
Right.
So there's tremendous energy around our campaign, just like there was in April across the city.
But turnout was low. I mean, we're looking at a 33% turnout, which frankly, I don't, it isn't good when you talk about a very important election. Why do you think that the turnout was low in this election? I mean, you mentioned the energy, but it seems that 2 out of 3 registered voters stayed home.
Well, we saw a tremendous turnout in places where we didn't expect to see tremendous turnout. A lot of people had written Ward 8 off, for example, saying that no, people don't vote in Ward 8. And we knew that wasn't the truth. We spent a lot of time focused on voters who may have come out and an Obama election and never voted in a general election. And I got to tell you, we made the decision to commit a lot of time and resources and locating our office. And I couldn't be more thrilled by the number of people who turned out.
And you could just look across the border to Maryland, where Anthony Brown lost in a stunning upset.
Well, what I told the night after the election, I was invited to a dinner Planned Parenthood gala, and there was some somber faces across the whole banquet room. But I told them, I'm Muriel Bowser, I'm a Democrat, and I won last night.
800-433-8850 is the number if you'd like to speak with Muriel Bowser. She is the mayor-elect of the District of Columbia, joining us in studio. You can watch our live stream at our website, kojoshow.org. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org or shoot us a tweet at Kojo Showtown.
I want to ask, because somebody's already tweeted that you said fresh start again, but you named your transition group this morning, and you named all the mayors, the former mayors, as their kind of ceremonial people to lead your transition. While they give you some gravitas for that, who's going to run the transition? You're going to get a bunch of reports and startup programs of what you need to do on day one, January 2nd at high noon. Is that Beverly Perry who's going to run the hard work of the staff, not the former mayor?
Well, I've been really grateful for some really great Washingtonians who stepped up to the plate. Today, you're making reference, we made the announcement of the 5 people who will co-chair the transition efforts. And they'll have various duties. And those co-chairs include Beverly Perry and Alice Rivlin, Maria Gomez, John Boardman, and Judge Mary Terrell. And so they represented a diversity of interest across the city, and they bring a strong presence to our efforts. And Beverly is certainly, she joined us first with those efforts and has been critical in working with the Gray administration on how the transition documents and all the other logistics will transfer to our
Down
efforts.
your headphones, please, because we have a caller who has a question about your transition team, and that would be Melissa in Washington, D.C. Melissa, you're on the air. Go ahead, please.
Hi, first I want to congratulate the mayor-elect. I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do. So here's a first hard question for you. I'm concerned to see Alice Rivlin as part of your team. She supports the change CPI, which cuts Social Security benefits, and is on Pete Peterson, a co-chair of Pete Peterson's Fix the Debt, which has been working around the country to cut pensions and attack teachers and really do all kinds of austerity economics. And as we're in a growth economy here in DC, we don't really need that kind of influence of austerity economics. Can you assuage my concerns, or can you say if you will also appoint somebody to your committee who believes in a progressive budgeting for the city?
Well, I think you'll be very pleased that next week we're going to announce our subcommittees and co-chairs of our subcommittees. And I'm proud to have Alice Rivlin as part of our team. I think you'll probably know that she's been very active in the resurgence of Washington, D.C. Nobody understands our budget better than Alice and the trends that the district faces. We are in a very good financial period right now, but none of us should rest on our laurels. We have to look ahead to the challenges and make sure that we're setting up our city, we're attracting jobs and growth so that we can continue to grow while also taking care of the many challenges that we face.
The reason I like Melissa's call is that Alice Rivlin is usually a consensus choice for this kind of team. You don't often hear somebody who says, look, I disagree with her.
I'm glad she said yes.
There is a problem around the country of pension benefit cuts and all those types of things. But here in the city, people forget that when the control board was in place and Alice Rivlin was the chair of that control board at one point, one of the agreements in doing that deal for the city was that the federal government took over our pension obligations, and billions of dollars of obligations of going forward. And so the city doesn't have the same kind of drag that Detroit and other places have had.
We have one of the most robust retirement funds anywhere in the country thanks to some of those decisions.
Melissa, does that make you any better?
A little. I just hope that as we're moving forward, we have a progressive view for the budget and get more money in the Housing Production Trust Fund, get more money back into the streets, so that way everybody in the city, especially people in Ward 5, 7, and 8, will benefit, just like a lot of the people in Wards 1, 2, and 3.
That sounds like her campaign.
Well, that's my commitment.
Thank you very much for your call, Patrick Matt.
Mayor-elect Bowser, you said in your victory speech that the status quo isn't good enough. You know, we saw after Mayor Fenty won, he dove right into school reform. What issue, what big ticket item do you think you're going to tackle right away as mayor?
Well, we know what the challenges that are going to face us when we walk in the door, our homeless crisis, and making sure that we're forging a new path to deal with it, the issues at DC General, but also the issues for single adults who are homeless. But more broadly, looking at how we're organized and how we're funding our approach to creating and preserving more affordable housing across the District of Columbia is going to be key. But you'll also see us focus on new tools and new solutions and using technology to better deliver services in the District of Columbia.
And you'll be taking over in January, which will be right in the heart of the homeless crisis.
You got it.
Is your plan to continue what Mayor Gray is going to do in terms of putting families in Maryland hotels? I mean, is your plan to continue his plan, or are you going to come in the middle of this with something different?
Well, certainly, even before the election, I called Alan Liu and the folks in DHS who are working on the homeless prevention now, before we even get into the hypothermia season, to make sure that DC General would be able to serve us for this winter and know what the plan is if we go over capacity. And we know that that's a possibility. One of the issues is funding, because quite frankly, there was no funding in the last budget for that emergency program. So I've started this conversation with Alan, but also with my current colleagues on the Council of the District of Columbia, because this funding gap has to be addressed.
Have you spoken to Gray about this issue yet since the election?
I have spoken to Alan. I've spoken to him just before the election, and so this is a main priority that will continue to be briefed.
I want to stay on homelessness for a second here, because Christy in Washington, D.C., has your question been answered?
Hi, Mayor-elect. This is Christy Restpress, Executive Director of Pathways to Housing here in D.C., and congratulations.
Thank you, Christy.
And you started, actually, the conversation, and the reason I called was I was really wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what you would like to achieve in the next year for both singles and families who are experiencing homelessness in the next year. It's an ongoing and continuing crisis, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on some more specific things you'd like to achieve.
Christy, thank you for your call. Walter, you would like to address the same issue, right?
No, hello?
Well, Walter, then you'll have to hold. I thought you wanted to talk about housing and homelessness. Yes, Walter.
Yes, the idea is I want to congratulate her. That's one issue. And just the idea, not on the housing so much as the charter school. You got to put a halt to some of that foolishness, ma'am. Would you please address that?
I thought you wanted to talk about affordable housing, but of course, Muriel Bowser can talk about.
So let me turn to Christy's question about homelessness, and my pledge has always been, I don't think that DC General is the appropriate place for families, and we know that the various shelters around the city are also not in the best condition or conducive to people dealing with the issues that led to their homelessness in the first place. So I want to revisit how the city gets back on track to a housing first policy, what those funding commitments are going to be. But we know that we're always going to have a need for low barrier emergency shelter. And so I will, to your question also, Patrick, look at what the mayor has on the table in terms of finding smaller units that are more conducive for families and more conducive to service needs of people who are exiting homelessness.
On the same issue, someone was talking to me about the Federal Emergency Management Agency and what it did with Katrina, and it had poorly run, but they had these emergency shelters. We have these trailers that we have put in schools for emergency classrooms, but there are I don't call them mobile homes, but that's essentially what they are, which can be put up pretty quickly in spaces where they can be people can be out of the cold. I've never heard anyone talk about emergency housing like that. I don't know how many motels there are in the city. Maryland does not want us to take our homeless people to motels in Maryland. Why isn't there more temporary mobile home style housing that we've seen in other places, like we have at schools where we need temporary classrooms?
Well, I
Yeah,
think
plumb.
that we want to make sure that we are supporting solutions that are will keep people safe in
Right.
safe environments, like you say, away from the elements. But we also want to invest in solutions that are going to help people out of their situations. And we know the sooner that we can get people into whether it's transitional housing that has, that they can stay beyond a night or a week or a month, then we can provide the types of services that are going to allow them to once and for all exit homelessness.
Go ahead, Tom.
Soccer deal.
Mm-hmm.
It's pending, it's pressing. There's a feeling that the council would like to get this done before you even take office, but you've had maybe a chance yet to see the report, the $200,000 report. Can the city get it done?
$200 report commissioned by the council.
$200,000.
Commissioned by the council?
Yes, by the council, yes.
For those of our listeners who may not be familiar with what you're talking about.
That's right, $200,000. But you've got some information now. As the mayor, you're going to have to make decisions even when you don't have all the information.
True.
So are you ready to take a firm stand on the soccer deal?
The city paper reports that report commissioned by the council would overpay by more than $25 million in completing the land swaps plan as a part of that.
Well, this is my commitment is to make sure we have a plan to keep DC united here. I continue to be troubled by the Reeves Center piece of the deal.
Jack Evans has said that is the deal.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, because I think if the city puts in front of the developers and the team a way to get to their stadium without our building, the team would do itself well, and so would the other property owner, to take that very seriously.
As mayor, would you? I mean, we've seen what they say that will essentially be overpaying for some of the land and not getting enough in return for the Reeves Center. This is based on the consultants. Will you go? I mean, if that's the deal, it has to go along with that. Would you be willing to go along with that if we are overpaying in the short term to bring the team here?
I don't. I think the way that it lays out, I'm still concerned of it, and I don't think we have to sell our building. Now, if
Mayor-elect coming saying we're not going to sell the building is a pretty powerful thing to.
And I think that we need to examine all of the scenarios. If there is a way that the city, now, it's a pretty tremendous thing to say that the city will invest $150 million in a stadium. Let's not forget that.
Soccer stadium.
Yes, in a soccer stadium. And so if the council, and it will be up to the council in the next couple of months, says we're willing to support the economic development that a stadium would bring by way of a capital investment. But by the way, we're going to hold on to our building at 14th and U, and maybe next year, if we decide to sell it, we can get a lot more money for it.
Is eminent domain off the table?
We only have about 2 minutes more left, but go ahead.
Is eminent domain off the table, you think?
I think all the economic development tools at our disposal should remain on the table. I'm not a big fan. You won't hear me talking about going and taking people's land. But if we can make an argument that there's a economic development project that is essential for our city, then I'm gonna leave all the tools on the table.
One last question. Beverly Perry, former executive, ran Pepco. One of the big issues coming up in the city is the Public Service Commission has to approve the sale of Pepco, the $7 billion sale of Pepco to Exelon, the big energy corporation. How will you separate Beverly Perry's role as representing Pepco and a retired executive of Pepco in that big issue, which affects all the people going into the winter and power reliability?
Well, there will be an absolute firewall. And this conversation that Beverly and I had early on, and we both agreed, and she's no longer works for Pepco, but certainly we know that many people in their minds connect her to the company. The mayor actually has no role in the approval of that merger. That is the Public Service Commission, which is an independent entity, which I think I've played a role in the appointment of each of the commissioners that's presently on the commission.
And final question.
The final question.
I said your last question.
That was penultimate
As for
question.
who replaces you, if Brandon Todd, who worked in your office and who ran as worked as your finance director. If he decides to run for council in Ward 4, would you support him?
Well, I am the Ward 4 council member until I'm not the Ward 4 council member, and I imagine I'll have something to say about all of the candidates.
So you will make
Sorry,
an
Brandon, I
endorsement.
couldn't get it out of her.
I want to ask about media relations because we had
You got 30 seconds.
Mayor Sharon Pratt Kelly isolated herself in her office and she suffered for it, got 13% in the re-election bid. Adrian Finty won every precinct in 2006, isolated himself from business, labor, and media, and he lost badly in 2010. You've had your issues with media people. What's your view on it in terms of how you're going to, do you have weekly press conferences, bi-weekly, or have you decided anything?
Well, I haven't decided on the schedule, but we do intend to be open and transparent and update the press regularly. We've had 2 press conferences in the last 48 hours, all well attended by the press, and we're grateful for it.
So you ready for us to dog you 10 reporters standing outside
you mean
your car?
More than the last 19 months?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually,
yes, I'm ready.
Muriel Bowser is mayor-elect
you.
of the District of
Thank
Columbia.
you.
She joined us in studio. Muriel Bowser, once again, congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Politics Hour. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's an NBC4 reporter. He's a columnist for the current newspapers. And if he gets desperate enough to find Muriel Bowser, since she is single and he's single, he'll make a date just to be able to get some information.
I don't think that's going to happen, Jojo.
He'll just do anything to get some information. 800
Well,
433-8850. Will soon be joined by Don Beyer. He's member-elect of the U.S. House of Representatives. He'll be representing Virginia's 8th District as a Democrat. He's also a former Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. You can start calling for him now, 800-433-8850. You can join our stream at kojo.org, where you can see both Tom Sherwood. He is our resident analyst, an NBC4 reporter, and a columnist for the current newspapers. And Pat Hatton is our guest analyst. He's a reporter for WAMU 88.5. The legislation, or the Initiative 71 to legalize marijuana in the District of Columbia, was passed overwhelmingly by voters this past Tuesday. However, that happened on the same day as both the House, which was already in the hands of the Republican Party, and the Senate turned to the Republican Party. And it is generally believed that the members in both the House and the Senate will be opposed to this legislation. How, to this initiative, how much of a chance do you think it has of surviving, Patrick?
I would say, well, in terms of surviving, I don't know, but I think the Republican Congress is going to focus on this. I think we've seen Andy Harris speak about this. He's the congressman from the Eastern Shore. It'll be interesting to see what happens here, because I think Congress, this is right on the table. It's right for there for the picking. If they want to, attach riders, defund this, there's a lot of different ways they can attack this maneuver. And also the city still has to figure out how to tax and sell it. So there are a number of hurdles until this initiative becomes law in the city. I
wonder how Cory Gardner, the senator-elect from Colorado, who's a Republican, if he's going to come to Washington. I mean, the Congress today, right now, I think there's a president's meeting with the leaders of the Congress. They have a lot to do. They don't necessarily have to get involved. People thought they would get themselves involved in same-sex marriage and things like that. And so it may be that the Congress will be so focused on these issues that it won't pay that much attention, particularly if someone like the Colorado senator comes and says, look, let's don't get sidetracked on this.
You think he is likely to go for the argument that, look, they're not allowed to interfere with it being legalized in Colorado, so why would they want to?
Oh, I don't know. It's going to be that high-minded in principle. Just Congress has a lot to do, and people have to remember this may take a year.
Getting much done.
Even if Congress approves it, it's going to take 6 months to write the regulations. At least Muriel Bowser, who just left, said that she would not allow this to have legal marijuana until all the regulatory stuff is in place. And even if we do get it, you can't be on federal property, parkland like DuPont Circle or other places because it's still a crime. You go to jail for a year with a $1,000 fine. It's a lot to be worked out on marijuana.
There were other elections on this day in the District of Columbia. There was a race for the at-large seat on the council, or for 2 at-large seats on the council. The incumbent Anita Barnes, Democrat, was widely favored to win one of them. The big toss-up was as to who the other person would be, and it turns out that it's independent, former Democrat Elissa Silverman.
And former journalist.
Former loose lips.
Yes, all of the above.
She's a lot of formers to be such a young person.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Elissa ran a great campaign. Obviously, she ran before, and that always helps in DC politics. When you run before, you get your name out there, it helps, bring out a name recognition, fundraising. Alyssa obviously ran a great campaign. She clearly was the second choice in this. She's replacing David Catania. It's also interesting that Michael Brown, the other Michael Brown, came in third place. That surprised a lot of people. I mean, this was a very...
It seems to suggest that you've got a better chance in these elections if either A, you already hold an elected office, or B, you have run before and done fairly well.
Right. I think that's the playbook, is you have to run a couple times really to sort of break through and get your name.
If she had wanted to do it, if Carol Schwartz had run for that at-large seat, she'd be preparing to take office on January 2nd.
You think so?
Instead of running for mayor, where she was kind of out of the loop on so many things.
Got 7%, which was even less than I expected.
Yeah, well,
I thought she'd get more.
But she could have run. I mean, Alyssa's going to be a very interesting council member. She worked with the DC Fiscal Policy Institute.
Yes.
Which is a progressive organization for spending on social issues. But she also has shown her ability to compromise and to work within the system. I think she intends, she says, to be a bulldog, and it's going to be interesting how she plays out. Charles Allen in Ward 6 is replacing Tommy Wells. I should have asked Muriel Bowser. The rumors that Tommy Wells may be in her administration as a transportation director or possibly human services. He won't say, she won't talk, but we'll know in the next couple of weeks.
Brianne
in Ward 1, and then it's just going to be a fourth of the council.
Because Alyssa now holds office, does this mean we can no longer ask her about her social life? She's now too powerful?
I think she's powerful enough now to answer it.
The other race, of course, that people were looking at very closely in the District of Columbia was the race for a post that had never been voted for before in this city, the race for Attorney General. That was won by Carl Racine, who raised a lot of money, put a lot of his own money into the race.
$500,000.
And I guess the biggest disappointment here must be for Paul Zuckerberg, who is the one who caused this election to come about in the first place and was among the early leaders in the polls.
Right. Without the, Paul Zuckerberg really pressing this issue, this wouldn't have been on the ballot. So I think, there's some disappointment there that he didn't get more votes. But again, I think the establishment really came down behind to support Carl Racine. He had the money. He, at the end, had the name recognition, which in a ballot, in a contest like this, that's really important. Just getting your.
He ran a disciplined campaign. I think people who are associated with Muriel Bowser also were for him. They wanted someone. He's a mature attorney. He's got he knows this office is not nearly as political as people made it in terms of, are you for this, are you for that? There's a lot of humdrum work that has to be done as Attorney General. I think people picked someone they thought would be a leader of that office.
It was interesting because this was the one campaign in which I saw where there didn't seem to be any significant, intense personal dislike among any of the candidates, maybe because they're all lawyers and that's the way they managed to conduct themselves. But this was one of the more civil campaigns that we've seen.
It was, although at the end there were some, you were starting to hear
Lori Masters put out some
news reports about there was overbilling in one person. The person's not ready to be a manager of such a big operation. But I agree. For the most part, you could tell it wasn't personal by any means.
I reminded that we'll be joined shortly by Don Beyer. He's member-elect of the U.S. House of Representatives, and we're taking your calls for him. You can start right now at 800-433-8850. You can send email to kojo@wamu.org or shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. But we obviously have to discuss what happened in the state of Maryland, where Lieutenant Governor Anthony Brown, the Democratic candidate for governor, was largely favored to win in the polls, but took a shellacking when you consider that Larry Hogan beat him by 5 percentage points. Even Larry Hogan himself says he was surprised by the margin of victory. What went right for Hogan, what went wrong for Brown?
Well, Larry Hogan had an internal poll a couple of weeks before saying he was going to be a win by 5. He was ahead by 5 points at that time. I mean, this is the Anthony Brown campaign. That was the Hindenburg of the year for the Democrats. I just thought, and I will say, I didn't do a lot of prognostication type stuff, but I did say I thought it was terrible that President Obama had to go to Prince George County to whip up the vote for Anthony Brown in Prince George's County, and a majority African American. I thought that red flags flying, that Michelle Obama had to come in, and Bill Clinton came in, and now Martin O'Malley has suggested maybe the campaign wasn't run very well. It was a huge disaster for the Democrats.
And my only experience was I covered the primary night victory for Anthony Brown, and it was just a surreal experience the way reporters were treated. We were basically cordoned off not really allowed to engage.
I remember you reporting that.
Yeah,
that night.
and it just seemed like something was off. And I think that sort of emblematic of what went wrong with that camp. People didn't really get to know Anthony Brown. They didn't know what he stood for. And I think looking back, they just made a number of mistakes.
Well, remember in the primary campaign, there was some controversy because his primary opponent, Doug Gansler, said or implied that all Anthony Brown was running on was that he was going to be the first African-American governor of Maryland. And one would have thought that even though he denied that was why he was running, that if that was in fact an emphasis, there should have been more of an effort to turn out the African-American base, because apparently, despite the fact that they brought in President Obama, and that base didn't really turn out
according to the polls,
in as large numbers as
especially in Prince George's County.
Yeah. Well, you have to remember Anthony Brown was chosen because he'd been the lieutenant governor, and O'Malley wanted him to win, in part because O'Malley would help burnish his, at this point, minor presidential credentials. And remember, just before Doug Gansler announced in September 24th, like 2 days before that, Barbara Mikulski, who doesn't normally get involved in lots of her laws, came out and suddenly endorsed Anthony Brown for governor, and to embarrass basically Doug Gansler. I mean, Doug Gansler ran the same kind of campaign that Larry Hogan ran. 40 income tax increases in 8 years is too many. We've got to adjust this. We're losing business to Virginia and to local. But nationally, the Democrats took a drubbing. You're going to go to a House that's even more Republican, a Senate that's Republican, first time since 2006. How do you hope to get something done? If anything, you're going to be a freshman, you'll sit in the back of the room and all of that.
Yeah, you know, when I jumped into the race back in January, it was with the expectation that it would continue to be a Republican House. And part of the reason I ran was because I was so frustrated, embarrassed, angered about how ineffective and broken it was. So I think my essential idea that all life is about relationship, and then I need to go there and be someone to take some of the bitterness and hyper-partisanship out of it, is as relevant, even more relevant in November as it was in January.
Well, let me talk about that, because that's the basis on which Senator Mark Warner campaigned. 6 years ago, he had an overwhelming victory. He campaigned this time on the basis of trying to establish himself as being bipartisan, and he barely squeaked out a victory on this occasion. And Congressman Jerry Connolly is really saying that what the Democratic base is interested in is not bipartisanship. They seem to be interested in people who will simply stand up to the Republican majority. How can you, on the one hand, attempt to get anything done by being bipartisan, and then on the other hand, please your supporters by standing up to what they see as the bullying of the majority party?
Well, first of all, I don't think Mark's strategy was wrong. And first of all, it was authentic. That really is who he is, and that's who he's always been as governor and as senator. So he had to do that because that was really authentic, and he survived. Most of the other close races, I mean, only Jeanne Shaheen, I guess, in the country. So it wasn't a defeat for his strategy. It was a victory for it. And I don't think Jerry Connolly's comments about a Democratic base wanting to stand up for clarity on things like women's reproductive rights and gun safety measures are inconsistent with also saying that we want to work together in a bipartisan way. And I think I don't want to retreat from my values or principles, but I do want to find areas of common agreement.
Can we go to a regional issue? I was talking to some people from Virginia today about this. You know, Barbara Mikulski has been the head of the Senate Appropriations Committee. Now she'll be the ranking member. She's been one of the principal proponents of bringing the FBI headquarters with 11,000 jobs to Prince George's County. It seems to me that this is an opening with the Republican Senate, maybe did Virginia step up its effort to get the FBI headquarters. You've got two powerful senators, Democratic senators, but it seems to me that FBI people I've talked to don't want to go to Prince George's County. They want to go to Virginia, but they felt like they were being pushed by the Senate Democrats.
Well, I don't have much insight into how that Senate Democratic tension has worked. I know that in Virginia, we will continue to try to make our best case that the FBI should come to Springfield. It will hurt to lose both Jim Moran and Frank Wolf, but happily we still have Senator Warner, Senator King, and Jerry Connolly.
Did you take a position on the Columbia Pike streetcar?
I did. I was very much for the streetcar. Yeah, but I also thought if it is the will of the county to have a referendum, that would be fine. There's nothing wrong with letting citizens weigh in. If they do have the referendum, I will encourage Arlington citizens to vote yes.
Our guest is Don Beyer, member-elect of the U.S. House of Representatives. He'll be representing Virginia's 8th District as a Democrat. He's a former Lieutenant Governor of Virginia and a former ambassador. If you have questions or comments for Don Beyer, you can call us at 800-433-8850. You can go to our website, kojoshow.org, watch a live stream of the broadcast, or shoot us a tweet at Kojo Show. Here's Patrick Madden.
Congressman-elect, there was a recent court action that declared that the congressional districts in Virginia are unconstitutional for gerrymandering reasons. Obviously, this could have a big impact on you just because of what district you will be representing when you run again in the future. But what do you think is going to happen here? Do you think the General Assembly is going to be able to come to a compromise with the Democratic governor, Republican General Assembly, or is this going to go to the 3-judge panel? And that will there'll be a big difference, right?
Yeah, I certainly hope the General Assembly is able to do it. I know there are a number of members of the General Assembly, Democrat and Republican, that are looking at it right now. I don't know how much it affects my district. I looked, there's, I think it's the Washington Post, or someone has an online ranking of gerrymandering, and the 8th district's the least gerrymandered district in Virginia with a relatively low score.
Is it the smallest one also?
Yeah, in terms of square miles.
Geographic,
yeah,
exactly. But once you start moving one, you have to sort of move everything around.
And that's okay. I mean, it was convenient and helpful for me to have a very democratic district. As an American who believes in democracy, the less gerrymandered, the better. I'm a big fan of independent redistricting.
I want to switch back again to the national level. The president's meeting today with the leadership of the House and Senate, Republicans and Democrats. That includes Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi. Do you think it's time for the Democrats to get new leadership? I mean, will you support Nancy Pelosi to be the, whatever the title is for not speaker, but
leader,
leader, right? House leader.
No, I will. And I will support Nancy for leader and Steny Hoyer for the minority whip. I think they did a really good job. The average congressional loss for a second-term president in the midterms is 29 seats. It looks like we're going to lose 12 or 13. So much better than typically in American history. They worked incredibly hard trying to save the seats that were out there. This was a wave election. People unhappy with where they were economically, unhappy with the president's leadership. And I don't think in any way it reflects on the kind of leadership we got from Ms. Pelosi and Mr. Hoyer.
One of the things you had campaigned on was improving the federal minimum wage at $7.25. Way behind what inflation has done to that wage. It doesn't seem that there was a Republican-controlled Congress is going to be very receptive. Do you have any inkling of what it might do?
Although I am optimistic that the 4 states where the minimum wage was on the ballot, they all passed. And I'm very encouraged that the increasing data that's coming from cities like Seattle that have raised their minimum wage up to so-called livable wage standards and still see good economic growth and not a loss of jobs. The old Congressional Budget Office argument that we'll lose 5,000 jobs if they raise the wage, I think there have been many additional data points since then that suggest that's probably not true.
But when it comes to federal employees in terms of giving them a pay hike, obviously their salaries have been frozen since furloughs. How realistic is it that this pay increase can happen for federal employees?
I don't know how realistic it is. I know it will be my responsibility with enthusiasm to fight for it. The 3 years with no wage increase, everyone fell pretty seriously behind. It was a small increase last year. There was a piece in the Post this morning that suggested that the Republican leadership is going to be less favorable to federal employees in general. I think that will be too sad. That one of the things we have to do is continue to raise the esteem, the appreciation for our federal employees who are incredibly valuable for us.
Well, I got to tell you, the president of the National Federation of Federal Employees seems to be not the least optimistic about this. He's quoted in GovExec as saying that he expects a Republican-controlled Senate would, quoting him, wield a pretty big hammer as far as putting together a budget, adding that it could attempt to do away with entire agencies or departments in the government with Republicans in power. All of the chamber's committees, of course, will flip to Republican leadership in the Senate. Are you as, well, pessimistic?
That sounds like the Reagan era, but that didn't happen. The government grew.
Well, I guess I'm not that pessimistic. I'm more pessimistic than I was on Monday. But I think there's again really interesting articles that many of the things that the Republicans have said they would like to do they're going to find more difficult to do when they actually get there. For example, on getting rid of the individual mandate in the health insurance, or getting rid of the medical device tax. And there's decent arguments for getting rid of them both, but both create huge fiscal holes. So how do they make up for all that money that's lost? So some of these things are easier to talk about on the campaign trail than to do in real life.
On to the telephones. Here's Lauren in Arlington, Virginia. Lauren, your turn.
Hi, Kojo. Don, I live in Arlington and I voted for you.
Thank you.
And I hear that you're welcome. And I'm cautiously optimistic. And the reason is that you're saying that you support the streetcar. Just this Tuesday, we in Arlington, the Democrats, said no to the streetcar, and we voted in for John Giestadt, who's a Republican. He's against the streetcar, and it seemed like this election that was the main issue between the candidates. And I just wanted to see if you would be open to changing your mind about that, because we really don't want the streetcar.
Lauren, thanks for your perspective, and I'd certainly not on Kojo's show, but talk at length about why I think the streetcar is a good idea. But I also very much respect the will of the voters. And I know Rip Sullivan, the new delegate, is going to introduce legislation in Richmond to create a referendum on this. And certainly if the voters vote no on that, I very much accept that. I don't think the John Giestadt election was only about the streetcar, though. I mean, the Post's interesting endorsement talked about, after many, many, many years of Democratic control of the Arlington board, the need for some balance. John ran as a fusion candidate, not as a Republican, but as somebody trying to bring both sides together. And
a man who made his living selling cars is supporting the streetcar?
There was a picture of you and your wife on election day. She was Megan. She was holding up her driver's license. I think I couldn't quite see it. It looks like a driver's license to prove that she was who she was, a voter ID, so she could vote. Did you have to show an ID card?
I did. In fact, I forgot mine. I had to go back to the car to get it.
Did you show your driver's license, your ambassador, alumni club card, or what? I'm getting to a serious question about voter ID and voter suppression. Did you get any sense around it? That happened?
I visited the electoral officials in about 15 precincts and asked everyone if they'd had any controversy over the voter ID, and that no one said they'd had any, which was pretty interesting. In general, I want to be a political leader who expands the electorate and has more people participate rather than fewer. So at least in the short run, it doesn't look like it had an impact in terms of people showing up and being turned away. What we don't know is the people who didn't come to show up at all. So.
It was a nice picture of you guys.
800-433-8850. What is your assessment of whether President Obama has enough clout to move an agenda? He says he's going to use executive authority, for instance, to change the nation's immigration system. What kind of support do you think he will get from you and fellow Democrats in the new Congress?
I think it will be split. On the one hand, where he uses the executive authority in a responsible, reasonable way, I think we will support him. I mean, he is the president, and presidents do that. But I also think and hope that the Republicans will be reasonable, controlling both houses, that they will come with legislation that the president can sign without having to hold his nose.
And are you worried about, with this Republican Congress now, the cuts that could be directed toward the federal government, and obviously the impact that will have on your district?
I am worried. Our district, the 8th district, has been pretty recession-proof for a long time. I brag that I've led the family business with 6 recessions, but they've been Northern Virginia recessions. But with the sequester, with the shutdown, with the retraction in government contracting, and even the federal workforce, we've been in a much more tenuous economic situation than a long time. And the economy and jobs is the #1 issue in Northern Virginia, as affluent as it is.
Yeah, Stephen Fuller from George Mason University and his group there have said the whole region, Maryland, D.C., we cannot depend on the exponential growth of the federal government for a considerable period of time.
I mean, Stephen Fuller very much is sort of the clarion warning cry out there. So I think, once again, even in my role as a freshman in the minority, I have to do everything I can to minimize its impact on Northern Virginia.
Do you know what committees you would like to be a part of? I know it's early.
It's still early, and I'm going to work hard wherever I'm placed.
Well, you ran for governor. Was it 97? What year was it? 97.
Yeah.
Jim Gilmore won.
Exactly. Yeah.
Ed Gillespie, I want to put on your analysis hat. This is the politics.
That was my next question. Very good.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, I thought you'd never get to it. No, so I apologize for jumping on your question. But I'm really, Ed Gillespie, if he had gotten a little more national Republican attention, maybe he would have pulled up maybe the bigger upset than Anthony Brown losing the governor's race in Maryland.
I think we were lucky that the National Republican Senate Committee did weigh in.
It was remarkable. Now, Ed Gillespie is already being talked about, of course, is running for governor 2 years hence in 2017. What do you think about that race, other than being lucky that the Republicans chose to be elsewhere?
Well, I think many of our political wonks early on thought that the reason Ed was running was to set himself up for 2017. Mm-hmm. After the sweep with McAuliffe, Northam, and Herring, there was no obvious Republican candidate. But I think, and then when he was behind by 25 points in Labor Day, I thought, well, this isn't going to work really well. But with that narrow a victory for Mark Warner, I think Gillespie's in a good position to take on Northam, Herring, or whatever Democratic candidate emerges.
Why do you think the victory was that narrow?
I think the national wave. I think I very much attribute it to the 1/3 of all voters who came out to essentially vote against the president and the way they felt about the economy right now.
On to Tommy in Gaithersburg, Maryland, who also wants to talk about the minimum wage. Tommy, your turn.
Hi, guys. I just wanted to touch on minimum wage real quick because I'm just wondering why it is such an issue when they could probably easily just incorporate it with inflation. Why wouldn't government officials and people who vote on things like this, why wouldn't they just incorporate with inflation instead of making a constant issue every election?
Tommy, that's a great question. And the minimum wage proposal that I and many others have campaigned on calls for indexing it to inflation in the future so that you have one big debate now and then you don't have to do it again.
And by inflation now, it's 725. If you went by inflation now, it would be what, about 925, 950?
Or even some say that you have to take it back to 1025 to take it to where it was in 1974.
But of course, the argument against that is made by people who say if you raise the minimum wage, it will lead to greater inflation because prices invariably follow salaries. And if people are making more money, then prices will follow those salaries. How do you respond?
I think there will be some things that will follow that. We were in Switzerland for 4 years where the minimum wage is about $53,000 a year. So a Big Mac is about $10. I mean, you do see that directly. But there are many, many other things that would not be affected by a minimum wage.
Do we have time to ask about climate change? Because you
have 2 minutes.
Oh, 1
minute and 53 seconds.
I'll just very quickly ask you again, given the climate of politics in the nation now, the Republican response, who on the Republican side is concerned about climate change?
Well, I know Michael Grimm was the first elected Republican to come out for it, and interestingly, he won over Dominic Reck in Staten Island. One of my goals, by the way, climate change doesn't poll high, but I very much think the responsibility of leaders is to think long term. And everything you see from the science says that it is going to be a major issue for us in the years to come. And my goal would be to try to take it out of a Democrat versus Republican, right versus left paradigm, so we can talk about the science.
And just quickly, the gun safety, gun issues. This is something that you were one of the few Democrats, I think, to really bring this issue up, especially in a purple state. Any chance that there'll be any traction here on the issue for all the different issues with gun violence?
Well, I know I'm going to keep trying to lead on it, and the focus will not be massive gun control things, but rather, how do we keep guns out of the hands of the dangerously mentally ill? How do we keep criminals from buying them?
Don Beyer is a member-elect of the U.S. House of Representatives. He'll be representing Virginia's 8th District as a Democrat, former Lieutenant Governor of Virginia, former ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Congressman-elect, thank you very much for joining
us. Thank you, very much.
Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's an NBC4 reporter and a columnist for the current newspapers. Now that this long election season is over, any plans?
I'm going to be on Arena Stage tonight with Diane Rehm. We're part of the Civil War program. I'm playing part of a Union general, despite my accent.
Tom Sherwood, thespian. Patrick Madden is our guest today. He is a reporter for WAMU 88.5. Patrick, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Kojo.
And thank you all for listening. I'm Kojo Nandi.